All right. Can you guys say your name and when you were born for the purposes of the interview?
I am Anna Kennington Anderson, and I was born May 10th, 1947.
Dave Anderson, and I was born March 23rd, 1946.
Awesome.
That's 19, not 18.
So what do you guys remember about the Vietnam War?
Well, I know it was an unpopular war, and there was a lot of demonstrations in cities against it. And politically, it was very unpopular. And I had several friends, including my own brother, that got drafted and was sent to Vietnam. And I had a couple other friends that were sent to Vietnam and they got killed.
Drafted means they were called. They had to serve. They were drafted. They had to serve.
And so I had one good friend in Lewiston. He was a Nez Perce Indian, full-blooded member of the church. And he got drafted and went over there and he got shot by a sniper. I felt really bad about that. But anyway, it went on. I think there was 50,000 people killed in that war. And I can remember that the Russians were supporting the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, and they were going all in, giving them everything they needed, airplanes, equipment, and everything. And the United States would have won that war if they wouldn't have let the politics get involved in it. They drew so many lines that they couldn't cross, and people were getting killed because the government wouldn't let them fight. And that's what made it so unpopular. But if they'd have let it go, let them do what they wanted, they would have gone in there and won that war. But politics got in the way. What do you remember?
Oh, you know, it affected how many could go on missions. It affected all of our lives. When I was at BYU, all of my roommates but one, we were engaged, and one of my roommates' husband had to go to Vietnam and he was killed. I had a friend who was a Vietnam vet, and he said I don't remember his position in Vietnam, but he was in charge, and he was 18 years old and in charge, and he basically decided who in his unit died that day. The ones he put in front were the ones that more likely to be killed that day. Very, very hard. Mm-hmm. Then they decided to do the draft by number. Tell them by number.
Yeah, the government was going to put a lottery system in to draft people, and I was 18 at the time, and my brother got drafted, and then I got a letter from the draft board, and I was at BYU.
Let me say something. You did get exemptions for being a student or keeping your grades up, or, you know, there were certain things you could do to put it off. This wasn't like World War II when they were anxious to serve. This was not a popular war, and people were not anxious to serve. So Dave got...
Well, I was in school when I got the letter, and then they said, don't make any plans, because when you get out of this year of school, you're going to go into the draft. And during that time, the government instituted a number lottery system. And I remember they started to draw numbers, and my number ended up being 256. And then they put all these numbers in a lottery and started drawing them.
So if you had a low number, you were very likely to be called up. Those low numbers were called up
Well, no, they
first.
put all the numbers in like a big jar, and they started pulling them out. And
By birthday.
no, it didn't have anything to do with that. It was the numbers. They put them all in a big, like there was 300 of them or 400 of them.
There were 365 numbers.
Well, everybody got assigned a number, and mine was 256. And it's like bingo. You put the numbers in a jar, and if they pulled a number out, and if it's 256, I was drafted. So I remember sitting by the radio, or it might have been TV, I don't remember. Maybe Anna was there too. But they started drawing. They started drawing one, but it wasn't one. It was a number out of the total number. And then they lined those up, and they are the ones that would be drafted first. And it kept going and going and going, and my 256 number hadn't been drawn yet. And then they kept going and going and going and going and going. And then they got to a point where they had drawn enough numbers, because every potential draftee was assigned a number. So I was 256, and there might have been 5,000 256s in the country. But they got going, and they got well into it, and finally decided that they had enough men that were drafted, and I hadn't been drawn yet. And so they finally drew it off out to the end. My number come up right on the end. And so I was far enough down the line to where I wasn't going to go. And I was so excited about that, because I could finish school and do all that and get married and so forth. So I never did get drafted, but because of the lottery system.
And then when the soldiers came home, they were not treated well. They were despised and spit on. And we were from small areas. The bigger cities were a lot more militant, but it was not popular.
Yeah, that was one thing that really bothered me. Those soldiers were really disrespected, and they've since made it up and tried to do the best they could to ignore all that stuff or to get rid of it. And now they're treated with a little more dignity and so forth. But these war protesters, they were idiots. But the thing is, we should have never been in that war.
That was why it was unpopular. It wasn't,
Well,
we had no business being in it.
and President Johnson was the president at the time, and it was such a drain on him. And he took so much flack that he made the announcement that he wasn't going to run for re-election. And I think it was because of that war. He was a one-term president. And then the next president, who was the next one? Nixon?
We did. Let's see. Let me look it up.
Nixon ran against Goldwater, didn't he?
I think it was Nixon.
I think it was Kennedy. No, you're right. It was Nixon.
But anyway, he got in there and he ended the war and just pulled out of Vietnam, and
He pulled the United States out of
he
Vietnam.
just pulled out of there and got the prisoners out of there. And there was a lot of airplane pilots like John McCain, a senator. They were negotiated out of there, and I remember them bringing them home on an airplane, and they landed, I think it was Dulles Air Force Base in Washington, and there was a large crowd, and they all got off the airplane. One of them came down the ramp, and he stooped down and kissed the ground and was just happy to be home. But anyway, some of those people were prisoners for 4 or 5 years over there. It was terrible. But anyway, we should have never been over there because there was no reason to be there. And if we go to war, we need to go to war to win, not to
just drag it out.
not for the politics and everything. And
Not for just the old men.
we
in
lost a lot of
Washington.
people, but the Viet Cong, they lost a lot too. They lost millions.
Do you think that we did win or lose?
I don't know I don't think we won it. I think it was kind of a draw.
I think
And we pulled out of South Vietnam, and the North Vietnam took over the South Vietnam country, and
was that good or bad? Was that good
It
or
was bad because
Yeah.
they marched in there, and all the leaders and everything of any significance were executed, and they took over the whole country.
How? So you know what Agent Orange is? The pesticide.
Right.
That. How do you feel? Do you know anyone who was like affected by it?
No, I remember hearing it on TV I remember watching the planes on TV going down the forest and spraying that Agent Orange over the soldiers, the Viet Cong and everything.
and they're still today affected by that Agent Orange. Their skin, it was.
But it was these great big planes, and they dumped a lot of it. And then some of the planes dropped napalm and stuff,
Which is a chemical that
high accelerant that really. So anyway, the United States, they leveled a lot of things, and they went in there, instead of going through the forest, they'd come in with the B-52s. And they'd drop all these bombs and napalm, and they'd just level the forest, just take them out. And that was cheaper than losing all these people, because the Viet Cong were pretty good fighters in the forest. They were hard to get out of there. But
and so many people really were affected by it. My brother's friend, I invited my brother and his friends to the ranch house, and Lawrence was his name. He's very shy to begin with, and he got drafted, and he hadn't met with those friends. When he came, he brought articles, and he brought a picture of him receiving a Purple Heart, and that, and we didn't go into detail there on it. It affected his mind. You know, when you're 18 years old and you see those horrendous, awful things. And as Lawrence was leaving, he left before the other men left, and as he was leaving, I said, I would like to visit with you sometime about all those pictures. I did. And he got tears in his eyes, and he said, no, you don't want to know how awful it was.
well, and I remember too at the end when the United States was pulling out of Saigon, they had 2 or 3 great big cargo planes, where the back ramp went down on the back, and they were pulling out all our personnel, and they were running up those ramps into those cargo planes, and then the Vietnamese, the citizens, were trying to get on those planes, and
They knew what was. They didn't want to be left behind.
well, the
They
Viet
knew.
Cong was coming in on the outskirts of Saigon, and we took some of the Vietnamese out. Some of the leaders and everything got on those planes, those planes would hold, you know, about 1,000 people, and they just got packed and loaded, and finally they took off, and the ramp was coming up, and the people were chasing the plane down the runway, grabbing onto the plane, trying to get on the plane, and they were pushing them off because they would die anyway. And then the planes finally took off, and that was it. They were done. They were gone.
It would be like Hassan down here, you know, who comes with Kennedy. He's a refugee from Afghanistan. And he and his dad, they needed to get him out of there to keep him safe. And that's why these Vietnamese were trying to get on the airplane to keep them safe. It's just...
Yeah, the Viet Cong, just go in and shoot them, just machine gun everybody down.
Yeah, so we are very, very blessed.
So, and that pretty much ended the war and got everybody home, and it was a good thing to end. Everybody was happy about it, but we lost a lot of men.
A lot of men. It did affect a lot of people. We lost a lot of men, and a lot of men came back so broken. So, I mean, they survived, but I don't know that war mentality, but I think they feel guilty because they survived and the buddy next to him didn't. It's mentally very difficult.
Do you think the GI Bill made up for that at all?
Well, it helped, but it certainly didn't correct everything that had gone on, but it helped.
Helped.
These people got free medical help, you know, and
our veterans, and especially our Vietnam veterans, are not treated well. Have not been treated well. I don't know how you make up for it, but a lot of them are homeless. Part of that's because of the mental anguish that they suffered from, and I don't know if you can make it right for them. Except, now this is religion, but it's okay. Except live the best you can. Serve others and live the best you can.
Well, they helped them out quite a bit during the former President Trump, because they gave them medical cards where they could go to any doctor they wanted to instead of just the VA. Because the VA was corrupt and didn't treat them very well, and those people had these cushy jobs, and a lot of them didn't work very hard, and so Trump went in there and shook all that up and gave them all medical cards and told them, you don't have to go to the VA, just go to whatever doctor you want, give them this card, charge it, and we'll pay for it. And I know that was expensive, but I think it was a good thing.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being interested. I hope you do well on your